Greetings all. Greetings, parents. Wow. Fostering joy. It's really a cool approach and a cool framework to look at things through. There are a lot of positive things to experience on a journey, even throughout challenges. There are a lot of positives to be found within. I want to thank Hands and Voices for sharing this concept, and this booklet is very creative. I'd like to share a bit about myself. I'm Dr. David Gieslin, current superintendent of Indiana School for the Deaf.
The school is located in Indianapolis.
I actually grew up going to Indiana School for the Deaf for much of my early years, and then later I was mainstreamed half-time at Brebeuf, which is a college preparatory private Catholic school. I later went on to Gallaudet University for 2 years and later transferred to Purdue University, where I completed my 4-year degree, and then went on to Boston University, where I completed my master's. I received my doctorate at Indiana University. As I mentioned, I'm the current superintendent of Indiana School for the Deaf. I'd like to share a perspective with you. I'll be using the word deaf for the rest of this presentation, and that's inclusive of hard of hearing and people who are deaf. It's like the term hearing loss. It's very global, and I use the word deaf in that same way. We prefer to call ourselves deaf regardless of our hearing levels. We do not like the term hearing impaired. If I could be tongue-in-cheek for a moment, I'm not woman impaired, right? We would say that I'm just a man and I'm deaf. So you can make that comparison. When they asked me to present, I was very honored, and I thought about the story I could share, but I felt it would be better coming from a parent perspective that's on the same journey as you. My mother is hearing. I have a sister and a brother. They're both hearing, the only deaf person in my family. And I thought that hearing from them might be better. Also, they're all probably a little better looking than me as well. At this time, I'd like to pose this question to my mother. Mom, as you reflect on raising a deaf child, think about any incidents that you have found through the years that are positive, that have positively impacted you on your life and on your journey. We call this deaf gain. So those are positive experiences that you may not have had you not had a deaf child. There are two different paths your life could have gone on. But when you had a deaf child, you did have benefits through your professional life, through your personal life, and moving forward. So I'll turn it to you, Mom. Thank you.
Hey, I'm glad to. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be David Giesling's mom. David's positive attitude and remarkable curiosity gave us confidence to pursue our commitment to set a good example, encourage positive outcomes, and offer every possible opportunity for education and learning. I learned new methods of communicating, signing, and making the effort to be present in the moment in front of David. I learned the importance of focus in dealing with people deaf or hearing. I developed new friendships. I learned about special needs and effective ways to make them positive. I learned about special schools. I studied the educational options. I met other parents of deaf children, and we shared our knowledge and our experience. David taught us the meaning of acceptance. We shared our experiences with David with our friends and family. I learned about the causes of deafness, what had happened in David's ear to cause this to happen when I had rubella I learned of the treatment of deaf people in other countries. I studied the family dynamics in our family and in the families with deaf members. I learned to know what opportunities of understanding David might be missing due to not hearing. And so I created an environment for learning. As David learned, grew, and developed, our family profited through his experiences. If David had not come into our family, the enrichment of living with him would have been a serious loss for all of us. I find that I am open to all people and all handicaps, and my life has been enriched by this acceptance. There are some important and interesting little stories to tell about David. And since he can't stop me, I'm going to do it. One time we were invited to attend a children's party at a women's club in Indianapolis. And it was a Christmas party. And we were invited to come. And I think that children had some special Christmas treats, but they also entertained them with a little group of people from the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra. So there were just a few, it wasn't the whole orchestra, but they had violin and cello and bass and a tuba. And David just sat down on the floor with all the other little kids. And I was sitting way in the back of the room on chairs with the other mothers and the ladies from the club. And David, sitting right up there in front, stood up when they were playing. And the old ladies were all saying, sit down, you're not supposed to stand up. And of course, he didn't hear them, so he stood up. And then in a few minutes, he walked up to the tuba player and just stood beside him and watched him play. And I'm sure he could hear that deep sound because it was tuba is very strong, makes a very strong sound. And they were in a register that I think David probably could hear. And the tuba player smiled at him, and then they stopped, to start a new song. And before they started the new song, the tuba player reached over and put David's hand on the tuba. And David just stood there the whole time they played, and he could feel the sound on that tuba. It was very exciting to David. And when he was finished, when the song was finished, David went back and sat down, as the old ladies had told him to do. And it was an experience that I'll never forget, because what it shows you is that out of all situations, something can be learned and developed. And that was a wonderful opportunity for David. And while he maybe wasn't supposed to be standing up and walking into the players, it gave him the opportunity to understand sound and understand music and understand musical instruments. So that was interesting. And another experience that I had that I feel made an impression on me to continue this kind of teaching. And I was reading a book. And I think it was Rosemary's Baby, but I can't remember. It was not a book I would have recommended for David, but he said, "What's that book about?" And the part of the book that I was reading was about reincarnation. And I thought, well, I would have trouble explaining that to a hearing child. But I spelled the word for him, and he said, "What does that mean?" And as well as I could, I explained what reincarnation was, but I had to do it with sign language. I could never have explained that orally to a deaf person. And he was fascinated. He asked me lots of questions about it, and then he read the book. So by having the definition and the understanding of what it was about, I think he was able to get something out of the book, and he was fascinated with it. He was not very old at the time, maybe 6 or 7. So all in all, it has been a wonderful trip. And I have to say, I've probably learned a lot more than David because there was so much I didn't know. But it's been wonderful to learn. It's been wonderful to do it with David. And I find myself open to all people and all people with handicaps. And I'm not hesitant to go forward and speak to them. And I find their behavior, their difficulties acceptable, and I have learned how to communicate with them. So it has been a wonderful trip. And I always, every day, thank David.
Thank you, Mom, for mentioning that. I do want to ask you an additional question, but prior to that, I would like to mention to the audience, to the parents today, that this presentation is not about using ASL only or using spoken English only or both or somewhere in between. It really just applies to you and your journey, having a deaf child as a parent, and wherever that may lead you, and whatever works for your child. And I respect those choices. Now, going back to my mom, I have a question for you. If you could just expand on what you meant by being present. Could you elaborate on that?
When you have a young deaf child, seeing and experiencing things is very important, and one-on-one. For instance, when he was little, he would see a flower or a tree or a bush or something that he was fascinated with, and he'd run over. And where a hearing child, I might have said, well, just look from here. You don't need to go over and look at that. But with David, I knew that he needed to go look at that and really experience it. And so I think that it was an important lesson that I learned, and that it takes time. So you have to be sure you're taking the time to give the deaf child these experiences and enjoying them with them.
Do you find yourself using that theme of being present in your career at work? Do you see that transfer?
Well, I think very definitely. And especially communicating with anybody that is a stranger can be, as challenging as communicating with someone who is deaf. I learned to communicate with David and to use his deafness to advantage. But if you don't know someone, yes, and being present in the moment with someone is very important. So for instance, what I'm saying is that you can be there but not really be engaged. But if you are there and are engaged and are focused on that person and what you're talking about, it's terribly important. And in business, that is really, really important.
Thank you, Mom. Wow. That reminds me of a book that was written. It's from France, and it is a business study of deaf culture, deaf community, and the way that deaf people communicate, how they are present with one another. And they published an article from this study, and encouraged businesses to use this model to help their businesses thrive and have effective community. So it's interesting that even businesses can use this model to get deaf gain. At this time, I'll turn it over to my sister. I'm sure I drove her crazy in younger years. Could you address deaf gain?
You were definitely normal brother, annoying,
Right.
pain. No, I'm joking. No, I'm really not. He was really a pain in a good way. I'm younger, a lot younger than you, right?
Yes, you're younger and better looking than me.
Because I was younger, I grew up bilingual. So I had two languages, from the start, which I think is really cool. I didn't realize that when I was growing up, but because it was, what I knew, but that was really, really neat. Also, I thought it was really cool that you and I had like a secret language. People didn't know what I was saying, so we could be out and I could say something about this, person or that person, not bad things, but just they didn't know what I was saying. And I thought that was really cool. Like mom, I am much, much, much more accepting of other people that are different. And different is good. It's awesome. So I am so happy that that I feel that way about people. And I think people sometimes they're afraid of different. But me, I think it's fine. I think it's great. It makes the world a better place. And so I'm happy that
Sure.
I am accepting of that. And it's because of you, really. I mean, maybe I would have been like that, but I don't know. But if you live with a little bit different, then it's fine. It's good. My friends thought it was really awesome that I could sign. So that made me a little bit cool. I'm not really cool, but it was good, it made me different in a good way. And so that was really good. So I loved that. Another thing is my children. So both of my daughters went to college. Both of them could have picked Spanish and finished with testing and been finished with their language, requirements. And they both opted to take ASL in college. And my younger daughter, I keep saying sister, sorry, daughter, she goes to school in DC. And so she took classes at Georgetown. And she takes at Gallaudet, sorry. She goes to Georgetown. But that experience was really amazing for her. And she really loved being on that campus, and it's all sign. And she would call me after and talk about what a really great experience that was. And it was hard, but in a good way. She really learned, a lot. So anyway, those are the things, I think of. But, at the end of the day, if I could change you, I wouldn't, because I think I'm a better person because you are the way you are. I'm so happy we learned to sign, because that, for me, I think is the best way to communicate with you. And so, anyway.
Yes, I think it's interesting with the two of us. I was born deaf. Time went on. We, started those early years together, and instinctively, we both knew that we needed to communicate using signs and gestures, home signs. I had not been exposed to formal ASL as of yet. I was oral up until that point and used hearing aids and a body aid. And we did communicate using sign language, and our parents saw that. Our bodies just knew physiologically, and our minds developmentally processed that and naturally knew that we needed to maintain eye contact and communicate using sign language. And I just think that's very interesting.
So I have it's not a good story. I thought it was sort of funny for a child. So when I would get really, 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 really mad at you, I, most children would be like, I would close my eyes. You would get so mad. But I think it's really, really, really funny that I knew would not work, but that would work. So I think that's a funny story.
That's true.
Oh, yes, I remember that. You were so smart. You truly internalized deaf culture, and you knew how to be deaf and to adjust and accommodate for that and with other people. It was really amazing. And we just had a wonderful time together and adventures growing up. I so enjoyed that. At this time, I'll turn it over to my brother for him to share his experiences with deaf gains.
I'm going to speak just so I can try to tie my words together and not worry about my poor grammar in ASL. Before I talk about the deaf gains, I almost want to add just how normal it was growing up with a deaf brother, especially a deaf older brother. It wasn't anything that I ever had a negative feeling about. It was what I grew up in, and probably when I was at a very, very young age, I thought, well, everyone has a deaf brother. And the reason I highlight that is, I think for a lot of families with a deaf child coming in to their family, there will certainly be changes, but at the end of the day, you still have this wonderful family dynamic, wonderful relationship with a deaf child that isn't going to change because he or she is deaf. And I bonded with my brother very early, and we communicated all the time. I could never get enough of him. And unfortunately, he had to go to college while I was growing up, so that made me sad. So I wanted to touch on that just because as different as it is, it was also very normal. And I just think that families need to know that. I knew I was going to do this.
Well, I will interrupt and just tell a little story about Chris because he was obviously the object of all of our eyes. He was when he was a baby, and David was just crazy about him. But one morning, I got Chris up and I put him down on the floor. He couldn't walk yet. He just crawled, and he scampered into David's room and pulled himself up on the side of the bed and stood there and just moved his fingers, expecting David to wake up. And he did that a couple of times. He wasn't really spelling anything. He didn't know how, but he was just moving his fingers, and nothing was happening. And so after trying and trying, he just jabbed David with his fingers, and David woke up. And Chris was happy.
Well, then getting back to your original point of your question, which is, how I have really benefited is most certainly the diversity of perspective. Challenging, I think, what is normal in this day and age is really important. Especially given current norms, what is current isn't necessarily right. So being able to, at a very young age, understand the importance of diversity, I think was invaluable, and enabled me to take more risks and take on things I never would have ever thought of. For example, in high school, I ended up volunteering and coaching seventh grade students at the Indiana School for the Deaf in basketball, or assistant coach. There's no way I would have had the courage to do that, without the experience that I had had. And just even that experience of being a coach, working with young deaf children, was incredibly enriching. The other thing I would highlight is how that has really helped me in my current role as a leader in an organization and as a manager, to have that good perspective on maybe individual needs of people, reasonable accommodation of people, and being able to work in a thoughtful way to bring a team together, which I would not have had that perspective without a deaf brother.
I'd like to address my sister and brother at this point. If the two of you could look back and think about it's really interesting. My journey had an impact on your lives and your journey. It's surprising, and really you can consider that part of the deaf gain. For example, a long time ago when I was in school, Indiana School for the Deaf wasn't that great at that specific time in life. They didn't have very high expectations for deaf children. Typically, Algebra 1, the course, was offered later in high school, sophomore, junior year. And I absolutely loved math. I was a nerd. I don't have a pocket protector to show it, but I am still a nerd. Even today, I even love science. At that time, when I reflect on it, actually, let me add, by the way, Indiana School for the Deaf does offer Algebra 1 to our 7th and 8th grade students if they would like to take it. We offer all the way up through AP Calculus as well. So we have made tremendous improvements since back in my time. But because of that experience, not being able to take Algebra 1 as a freshman, I ended up transferring to Brebeuf, a private school where I taught, or where I took, math, science, etc., even physics, my academics. So because I was not able to take that course at ISD, I ended up at Brebeuf. But I could have ended up at North Central High School. That could have been an option for me, but my parents toured the school and it was huge and the class sizes were extremely large, 30 to 40 students. And when they thought about me there with an interpreter, et cetera, and then they compared it to the opportunities at Buff, they had much smaller class sizes, 15 students possibly per class. That is what we ended up doing. And my path led to both my sister and my brother ended up on that same path. What are your thoughts about that gain that you experienced?
Because I saw you go there, and I loved, I mean, how you experienced that school. And now my third child is there at Buff now. It's I loved how they would do anything to help you in your studies. And I remember the other, you know, students, yeah. They're really loved you were there also, and they were happy to help you and make your experience really, you know, positive.
I mean, I don't have much to add. You guys are a very long 9 and a very long 12 years ahead of me. So it was, you know, it was sort of ingrained in me that that's where I would be going, and I was excited to go, and it was a remarkable experience. But maybe that's one other thing I should highlight is that my brother is deaf, and he has several more advanced degrees than I do. He became a leader faster than I ever was, and in large has been, you know, far more successful than me. So just would like to point that out as well.
Thank you, Chris. But I have to disagree. You have done phenomenally, and my sister has done phenomenally as well. Each of us has been successful in our own ways, and we followed our own paths, and each of those are equally phenomenal. It's fantastic and very impressive. Mom, at this time, could you share the story about the fish tank at ISD in the waiting room? I think that they would all like to hear this story.
That is a wonderful story, and that was my first experience with sign language. I took David to start school, and he was 3 years old. We had gone to the school and looked at the building and gone in the building and looked at the classrooms because I wanted him to know what was coming. And but the day that school started, I took him and we went in the front door, and there were other parents with children, and family came in. David, of course, has red hair. Well, you can't tell that now, but anyway, he did have red hair. And this little boy had beautiful red hair, and so did both of his parents. So I immediately noticed them, and they were all deaf, the parents and the son. And they took him right into the school, and they were so excited that he was in the school that they graduated from, and that he was going to get to do all the things that they got to do. And so the first thing they did was take him over to a huge fish tank that was attractive to children, and I'm sure was there because it was kind of a calming thing, and also it was interesting. And I, of course, had shown it to David, but you know, we just pointed at the fish, and I didn't know sign language. But this family stood at that fish tank and talked about all the fish and which ones were named what and what they did, and the little fish that cleaned at the bottom of the tank. And it was an eye opener to me. I thought, here's my son And I supposedly had done everything correct in his education so far, and he knew nothing about those fish except that he saw them. And here was this family that probably had done everything wrong, considering the values in deaf education at the time, and he knew everything about it. So that was the beginning of my changing my attitude about how we educate David and how we work all the time, every day. And I'm so glad I had that experience and that we were able to change.
Thank you, Mom, for sharing that story about the fish tank. My world at that time was more like being in black and white. And once I started to acquire sign language, it was like living in a full color television world with full access and 4K resolution. This next question I'd like to pose to the three of you: do you find yourselves filling an advocacy role for very diverse groups with disabilities, and supporting those areas in those ways? I do remember with my brother, he was involved in working with Senator Lugar in a variety of focus areas. One of the areas that he focused on was working to get the Deaf Olympics to be equally recognized as the Olympics and the Paralympics were. He worked tirelessly towards that. Have you found yourselves, Mom, Chris, Susan, doing this in your lives?
I worked hard in our church to, we eventually hired an interpreter for the Sunday morning service. And then I formed a church circle of women who were helping at the deaf school and helped with some educating we were doing. We had classes every week in all grades at the deaf school. And my dear mother worked the whole time I did. And I think we worked in the school for about 16 years. It was a wonderful mission. And then I just find that my friends and associates, when they have a question about deafness, they'll give me a call. Sometimes I can answer it and sometimes I can't. But I'm always interested, and I'm always reading, and I'm always trying to understand more.
I can't think of something right, now, but definitely, I have done things to help advocate for deafness or other people that have different needs. But I think it goes back to just understanding that people have different needs to live, and we need to be respectful of that. So.
Well, I remember, Susan, when you did some very sweet counseling with one of your good friends that had a Down syndrome, and she was very upset about it. And you went to her and expressed your belief that this was going to end up being a good thing for her. And I'm sure it has been, and for her other children. But you've done some really kind counseling like that.
So on my end, there's a lot. So I'm not going to try to touch on everything. But for me, a lot of it was simply an education campaign. Unfortunately, there are times in which um, advocacy related to disability issues can be a partisan issue. And I worked incredibly hard to not make that the case. And I worked for Senator Lugar, who is a Republican, but also someone who was very open to understanding differences and understanding disabilities, and really wanted to help. And I was very lucky. He trusted me and allowed me to, really push in areas where I thought we could make some headway. And so, I did attempt to make some policy changes, which hopefully was helpful. Also connected with another senator, Senator Tom Harkin from Iowa, who has a deaf brother.
Great.
And even in my roles after the Senate, I've worked on a number of communications campaigns for the workforce related to reasonable accommodation, and just general advice and awareness to senior leadership who may not be exposed to the same type of experiences that I've had.
And I think I probably should add that I did a good deal of that at the Benjamin Harrison Home when I was their director.
Yep.
We did tours in sign language, and then we expanded it. We had the group that works blind come down, and we created a tour just for blind, so we could explain to them what was in the room and how they could picture it in their minds, I guess. And we also did a tour for children that were challenged, and that would give them a few facts in each room and not overwhelm them with knowledge. And we used those on a regular basis. And I think that was reaching out to all handicaps to do what normal people, let's say, got to do. And we did also install an elevator so that the people who were in wheelchairs or had other physical handicaps could get to every floor in the building.
Thank you to my mom, my sister Susan, and my brother Chris. Really, the three of you have shaped me into who I am today. You allowed me to take risks. You allowed me to be curious and my mischievousness and adventurousness. You approached me with words of wisdom and helped me to become a really fulfilled person. Thank you so much to you for your role of advocacy within the community. You've made the world a better place to live for our community, for our future generations of children to come. So I thank the three of you profusely. A tip I'd like to share from my mother was that whenever she bought something new, and it may have been something extremely expensive, like a new china set or crystal glasses, she was so smart. She would bring those items home. She would open them up, unpack them, and let me look at them, touch each place setting, each plate, each cup, and then she would pack it up and put it away because she knew that I would not bother it anymore because my curiosity had been satiated. For you parents out there, you really are a part of our deaf community. And the deaf community is highly diverse. There are individuals that use spoken and listening skills, ASL, a variety, and a host of things in between. This gift that you are receiving today is that you are joining us in this community to make the world a better place for all people with their diverse needs. You will, and I know that I can rely on you to support access to communication out there. For example, using closed captioning on the television, making sure that's on all the time. I know that you will support that regardless of whether or not our community uses ASL or spoken language. We support one another within that. And we have a role to make the world a better place. Fostering joy is a celebration. It's a celebration because you are becoming an advocate for life. Welcome to being a part of our community. It's something to be celebrated. There are deaf gains there to be found, surprisingly, for you to use and enhance our community. Enjoy your child. Cherish every moment because it truly goes by so quickly. My daughter is 29 years old already, and it has just sped by in a blink of an eye. Enjoy every moment. Communicate like crazy, whether it be spoken language or ASL, just communicate nonstop. Tell your child what's happening around them. Feed them language at the dinner table. The more they know about our world, the more successful they will be in reading and writing. I send my love to all of the families out there with deaf children. Enjoy your amazing journey.